Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
Hello and welcome to Your Family's Health. My name is Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. And today we're going to meet a very strong Long Island teenager who is at the age of 8 was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and was in the onset of a deadly complication known as DKA or diabetic ketoacidosis. While she was fortunate to get help soon, some families aren't so lucky. Her name is Neve Pfaff, and she is from Garden City. Neve, welcome to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Welcome, Neve.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are also happy to welcome, through the power of Zoom, Jordan Gendricks, Vice President of Missions and Programs at Beyond Type 1, a non-for-profit organization changing what it means to live with diabetes. Jordan, also welcome to the show as well.
Thank you so much, Janine. So happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Neve, about yourself. I know you're 16 years old now, and 7 years ago, you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Am I right?
Yes. So it was the summer going into second grade. I started to experience a lot of the symptoms of DKA. At the time, my family had no idea what that meant. They thought it was a growth spurt, a virus, just like a weird stomach pain that I would get over. I was actually at my yearly physical, and my mom had mentioned thinking I had a UTI because I had to go to the bathroom a lot. I was drinking a lot of water, and the doctor looked at the results from the urine sample, and there was just like a tremendous amount of sugar. I was sent immediately to the emergency room and admitted to the ICU for 2 days, where, like you said, they told me that I was in DKA. And I was then diagnosed with diabetes. I've been living with it ever since. I was lucky to get help when I did. You know, a lot of people aren't as fortunate, and their complications are much more severe than mine were.
So at that time, how old were you?
I was 7 at the time.
Wow, that must have been quite scary for a 7-year-old, right?
Yes. It's weird because even though it was like 9 years ago, I can literally remember the day.
Vividly,
Vividly. But also I can remember the feeling of having like no idea what was going on. Yeah, I didn't even know, like, I remember the doctor saying, oh, you have to go to the ER. I had no idea what that even meant.
So, Jordan, for those who aren't familiar with diabetes, can you give us an overview of what type 1 diabetes is and the dangers associated with them?
So type 1 diabetes is a chronic autoimmune condition. When someone has type 1, their body, specifically their pancreas, stops producing insulin or doesn't produce enough insulin, which is the hormone that regulates your blood sugar. So people with type 1 diabetes have to take that insulin, just like Neve does, to maintain their blood sugar levels so they can avoid feeling sick or experiencing any complications. So basically, a person without diabetes doesn't have to worry about their insulin. Their body makes it on its own. It regulates its blood sugar without any issue. It's never too high. It's never too low.
So for those who are listening, type 1 diabetes and ketoacidosis, when we talk about ketoacidosis, why does that stick out as being an issue?
Diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA is what we call it for short. It's a complication that occurs when there isn't enough insulin in the body, so your body can't produce fuel the same way. So basically, instead of using that blood sugar to produce energy, you start burning fat instead, which produces ketones. So throwing a lot of terms at you, but essentially that can become toxic to a person with diabetes, a person with type 1 or type 2, and that will lead to further complications, including death if it goes untreated. So that is the biggest thing here. If a person with type 1 doesn't know that they have type 1 and it goes misdiagnosed or just isn't recognized and is not diagnosed, they're never going to know that they need to be taking that insulin, which could then prevent that decay from happening. That's why it's so crucial to recognize the signs and diagnose type 1 diabetes as early as possible before decay even becomes a possibility.
So this type 1 diabetes, does it usually happen in juveniles or into our young children?
It absolutely can. And historically, it's been called juvenile diabetes, but that's actually been debunked. We now know, like most recent research shows, that type 1 is actually diagnosed at least 50% of the time in folks older than 18. So it can occur at any age, which is really kind of an interesting update and something that wasn't previously thought.
So before we go a little deeper into type 1 diabetes, can you tell us about your organization Beyond Type 1 and talk about the campaign that you are involved with?
Absolutely. So Beyond Type 1 is a nonprofit that launched in 2015. We're changing what it means to live with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. So we provide the diabetes community with several platforms, programs, stories, resources, and grants. And we're really uniting people with diabetes around the world. We're providing helpful solutions to improve their lives, everybody living with diabetes and their loved ones. So that's where this campaign specifically comes in. The Warning Signs campaign was launched in 2016. Our team essentially got wind of a couple of incredibly sad and preventable deaths due to misdiagnoses of type 1. So we immediately realized this was really just an education problem. If enough people know about the early warning signs of diabetes, we can all prevent these tragic outcomes and see to it that all people with type 1 are diagnosed as early and safely as possible. So all it takes to determine type 1 is a simple blood sugar or urine test from a healthcare provider. So we urge anyone experiencing any of the signs to take that step and request a test. It's simple and could literally save your life.
So how can one distinguish between type 1 and type 2?
Essentially, there are a lot of misconceptions about type 1 and type 2. They're not the same thing. Type 1s are insulin dependent. So like I said before, they have to take insulin to regulate their blood sugar levels. Type 2s don't necessarily have to, but typically the longer someone has type 2, the more likely it is that they will require insulin at some point. That said, you can live your life with type 2 and never require insulin. Just like you can be diagnosed with either at any point in your life.
So Neve, tell me how you became involved with this campaign.
So it started a few months ago. Actually, before I became a state lead advocate, which basically my role now is to send out the posters and information to people within New York. I was actually one of the people receiving posters. I requested posters to be hung up at schools, the library, basically anywhere where there's a big crowd. And over time, I started looking for bigger leadership opportunities within diabetes. Personally, it's something that I feel pretty strongly about. It's something that I think more people need to be aware of. And so I started looking for opportunities within Beyond Type 1. And that's when I came across the DKA campaign and becoming a state lead advocate.
For those that are listening, what are some warning signs? And I know that, Neve, you talked about your own experience, but what are some warning signs that would really lend to me knowing that there's a problem going on and that I'm possibly a diabetic?
Yeah, so one of the major things is losing weight. When I was in DKA, I lost about 15 pounds. The excessive thirst, you're constantly thirsty, constantly having to go to the bathroom. You can run a fever, stomach pain. It's another one that I experienced when I was getting diagnosed. I had this intense cramp, literally right where the pancreas is located. And that's why it's kind of tricky, because a lot of the times doctors or parents, they don't look at diabetes as the first cause of that. They look at growth spurts or the flu, any other reason why you would be losing weight or having a temperature.
What are some ways, I know you do have type 1 diabetes, that you're managing your diabetes?
So I, like Jordan was talking about before, I am insulin dependent. So I use a pump, which it's kind of a weird thing to explain, but if you think about it as like a pancreas outside of your body. So I have a port in me 24/7. I'm constantly getting insulin delivered through a machine about the size of like a deck of cards that's clipped onto my waistband.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool when you actually take a step back and look at it. I also wear a Dexcom, which is a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. And that is actually, to me, that's the coolest piece of technology that I use. It sends my numbers to my phone, my watch.
Wow.
Yeah, so I can look down right now. And
you can tell me your blood sugar right now.
I can.
And then when you see your blood sugar, how does the machine deliver the insulin that you need in relation to your blood sugar that we see on your watch?
That varies person to person, and depending on the time of day, like you have different ratios. So one of the things when you enter your blood sugar, if it's above your target, then there's a ratio that you enter into the pump that then decides it does the math for you, which is great.
Wow.
Before I was on the pump, you have to do that math by hand. It does the math for you, tells you how much insulin you need. And that's the same with you enter how many carbs you eat. So like I did it for lunch today. I had about 35 carbs. I entered that into my pump, and it told me how much insulin I needed, and I just pressed deliver. Good. And does the rest of it.
That's great. That's pretty cool. You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard, and today we're talking with a very strong teenager. That is Neve Pfaff from Garden City, who at the age of 8 was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and was in the onset of a deadly complication known as DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis. Also with us through Zoom is Jordan Gendricks, Vice President of Mission and Programs at Beyond Type 1, a non-for-profit organization changing what it means to live with diabetes. So, Neve, a question for you. Are you active in sports?
Yes, I actually play a bunch of sports. I play tennis, lacrosse.
Ooh.
Lacrosse is my big one. I play that all through the summer as well. And then currently I'm on track and field. So
wow. And how does your blood glucose levels increase, decrease, and still you're able to maintain this active lifestyle?
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. Definitely something that you have to adjust to. Each sport kind of affects it differently. Like track, that will lower my blood sugar way more than lacrosse will. Mm-hmm. But in general, physical activity lowers the blood sugar.
Yeah. Jordan, how many states has this Warning Sign Advocate campaign? Is it going on just in New York, or is it throughout the United States? So where is it?
We're all throughout the United States. We currently have advocates in 47 states and Puerto Rico. Yeah, but we're always looking for more advocates, and we really do encourage anyone to get involved, so that we can just reach that many more individuals.
So how do I become an advocate?
So you can visit beyondtype1.org/DKA campaign. If you're interested in becoming an advocate. There's a form at the top of that page you can fill out to receive sharing materials that will be sent directly to you. And our team will ensure you have everything you need to start the process to become one. You can also email DKA@beyondtype1.org to reach out to us, and we'll get you taken care of.
So with this campaign, do you target certain age groups? How do you galvanize people to meet the needs of certain segments of the population?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we typically right now we have kind of monthly themes that we try to hit. So January we were hitting, gyms and fitness centers, and February we were hitting libraries and community centers. So we really break it up like that and encourage folks to hit kind of target demographics in their individual communities. But that said, Janine, nowhere is off limits. So if somebody comes to us and says, I want to give a presentation at my workplace, or my daughter wants to give a presentation to her class, can we get, 300 posters with your warning signs displayed? We say, absolutely, go for it. It's really about encouraging these advocates to raise awareness however and wherever they see fit, knowing that our goal at the end of the day is to reach that many more people and, ultimately save lives.
So there is also a Beyond Type 1. There's also Beyond Type 2 emphasis with this campaign. Can you tell me about that?
With this campaign in particular, this campaign is more so on the Beyond Type 1 side, just knowing, so essentially folks with Type 1 are more likely to experience DKA and other complications when they've been misdiagnosed or when they just haven't been diagnosed at all. That said, people with Type 2 can experience DKA. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just a little rarer, if you will. So on the Beyond Type 2 side, we don't have as much focus with this campaign. It's more so on the Type 1 side.
So Jordan, how familial is Type 1 or Type 2 diabetes? Does it run in families?
It absolutely can, but we also hear a lot of stories of folks that have no history of type 1 at all. That's why it's so tricky. If you have no familial history and you don't know to look out for it, you won't be looking for the signs. You won't know necessarily to go to your healthcare provider and say, hey, it might be type 1. That's, again, why this campaign is so important.
So, anybody in your family have diabetes?
No, actually. It's one of the reasons why it was so out of the blue for my parents. They never expected it. They had no idea about any of the signs.
Are you the only sibling?
No, I have 4 other siblings.
And no one else has diabetes?
No one else has diabetes.
Okay. So how does the food, I know that your siblings, your mom runs a house and she cooks meals for everyone. Did you have to have special meals? And tell me about what you eat.
No, I didn't have to have special meals. That's another thing that is kind of a misconception with diabetes is that, certain foods are off limits. Mm-hmm. I can still eat whatever I want. I can eat exactly what I was eating before I got diabetes. My mom has always cooked pretty healthy, so that makes it easier. Fattier foods, certain foods are harder to manage and certain line up with the insulin. So, the healthier eating is definitely easier to manage, but theoretically I could eat whatever I want.
So sometimes you have pizza and all that kind of stuff, am I right?
Oh,
Potato chips.
Totally. I had pizza last night.
All right, so that's great. It's good to hear that you have come to terms with managing.
Oh, yeah. That was a big adjustment. I would say definitely as I got older, it's gotten easier. I've taken on more of it myself. Mm-hmm. I've become more comfortable talking about it, mm-hmm. When I first was diagnosed, it was kind of awkward because, again, like Jordan was talking about, there's so many misconceptions with type 1 and type 2. It was kind of uncomfortable to talk about. I didn't want people to think I was weird.
Yeah.
But definitely as I've gotten older, it's gotten way easier.
So you talked about sports, that you're very involved with lacrosse and all those kinds of sports. How do you manage with the external devices that you have, your blood glucose monitoring device and, doing all these things? They're obvious to people who may be in your social circle. How do you explain it and how does that manage?
I pretty much just explain it as what it is. Most people that I play sports with or that I am social with, they know that I have diabetes. Mm-hmm. No one really cares. I say that in the nicest way. Yeah. They care in the sense that they're, will ask me if I'm okay, mm-hmm. if something seems off, but it hasn't really affected me socially or anything. Right. And I pretty much just explain it for what it is and people understand.
Jordan, how does Beyond Type 1 raise money to continue this great work that you're doing?
So thankfully with this campaign, we've been really fortunate to have been given a grant from the Helmsley Charitable Trust to continue this work and ensure we're helping get folks diagnosed promptly and reaching so many with this campaign. But we do fundraising through Beyond Type 1. We have a couple of awesome corporate funders as well as fundraising within the community through various events. And obviously our incredible advocates and volunteers end up doing quite a bit of work to fundraise for us as well.
So with the campaign, are there arms of education? Are there arms of learning about diet? Tell me the components that you're able to make aware in the community.
Everything that we do, everything that our advocates share ends up linking back to Beyond Type 1 and our entire ecosystem. So really, we're pushing out information from all of our platforms, and it really runs the gamut. So we do encourage folks, if this campaign is their first entry point, their first time, meeting us at Beyond Type 1, we are always encouraging them to visit our website and learn about everything we do. We've got management resources. We've got stories from community members. We have a really robust publishing arm. We publish about news, diabetes tech, like Neve was talking about. We have all of that on the Type 2 side as well as a host of other programs too. We have camps that we help facilitate for Type 1 adults. We take a team to the New York City Marathon every year.
Wow.
We have a snail mail program, which unites Type 1 individuals globally through letter writing. It's adorable. So you should absolutely, anybody listening to this that's affected by diabetes in one way or another should visit beyondtype1.org to learn more about all of our programs. We have something for everyone, and it's a fantastic way to connect and ensure you're building your own little community with this disease so that you're not alone with it. That's really the most important thing.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHBC. My name is Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard, and today we're talking with a very strong teenager, Neve Pfaff, from Garden City, who at the age of 8 was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and was in the onset of a deadly complication known as DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis. Also with us through Zoom is Jordan Gendricks, Vice President of Missions and Programs at Beyond Type 1, a non-for-profit organization changing what it means to live with diabetes. So, Neve, what type of insulin are you receiving?
I am receiving the pharmaceutical name is Novolog. And basically what that is it's just short-acting insulin. So when you're on the pump, one of the beauties of the pump is that you can keep it on all the time. So that is periodically administering small doses of the short-acting insulin. And for those people that aren't on the pump, what they would do instead is they would take 1 shot a day of long-acting insulin, which slowly breaks down throughout the day and keeps your numbers steady. And then the short-acting they would take with the long-acting is anytime you eat or you need to correct your numbers. So that obviously I'm already taking. So every time I eat, I just take a bigger dose of the short-acting.
So what if you're not eating? What if you feel sick or you're nauseous and you just can't eat? How do you manage your blood glucose?
That's kind of tricky because the ratios and everything like I was talking about before, that's all set up based on your daily schedule. So I have different doses at, let's say, 12 o'clock because that's when my lunch is in school. So that's when my lunch ratios are set for. Say I'm not eating that day, depending on what I'm doing instead, that's when your background insulin, which I was talking about, the small doses of the short-acting, that takes over and holds your numbers steady throughout the day. So when you're not eating, ideally, you would be held steady, but, sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes you'll drift lower because your body doesn't have anything to break down and use to regulate. Yeah, so it can be tricky.
Do you walk with snacks?
Yeah, I always have miniature Elmo juice boxes on me in case I go.
I see one now.
Yeah.
Your mom slipped you an Elmo juice box. I thought it was so cute.
Yeah, so I use that in case my blood sugar goes too low. And, with the help of the continuous glucose monitor and also myself, you can feel when you're going high and low. So that's when I know to take a juice.
Neve, have you ever went to speak to a community or group of young people about your experience with diabetes?
I haven't in a while, but I would say when I first got diagnosed in 2nd grade, I did talk to my class about it. I gave like a brief, my mom and I was small, gave a brief presentation to the class kind of about what it is and how that would affect me. I haven't done much talking about it, but I have done some raising money efforts. I did this lacrosse thing. It was partnered with JDRF a while ago, and I've done some walkathons to raise money.
Wonderful. And since that experience when you were very young with DKA, have you ever had to be hospitalized for another episode of DKA since you've become so knowledgeable about managing your diabetes?
I have not.
Good.
Yeah. I have not had to be rehospitalized, which I'm grateful for.
Yes, that's awesome. And how involved, I guess, your mom and your dad, how are they very protective of you since you're...
I would say it's definitely, my mom and dad literally did everything for me at the beginning. I'm so little. I was so little. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of taken on more responsibility. And I think they've accepted the fact that I kind of know how to handle it. I would say my mom is still pretty on top of me most of the time.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So, Jordan, this is really a good experience, a good, story about how a person who is young survives such a complex disease process as diabetes. It can be managed. Is that right, Jordan?
Absolutely. Type 1 diabetes can absolutely be managed. And what's more, something we say at Beyond Type 1 is you can live beyond your diabetes. You can actually do anything that you have ever dreamed of doing. Your diagnosis does not have to stop you. And that's something that we always try, to encourage type 1s to embrace and accept. There are going to be hard days. There are going to be days when you wish you didn't have this thing, if not every day. It's a chronic illness and it's not easy, but it gets better. and it's manageable. And more than that, you can truly thrive with it, which, judging by the way Neve talks and carries herself, it sounds like she definitely is.
Yes. So, Jordan, can you share any kind of story about an experience? I know Neve she's a prime example, but any other stories that you have come in contact with being a part of this organization that you would like to share with us?
I think there are so many that come to mind, so many people that participate in our programs and things. And obviously with this campaign in particular, one that immediately comes to mind was, I mentioned earlier, we have a marathon team that we take to the New York City Marathon every year. And I think this just speaks to how hard it can be sometimes to find community and how isolating this disease can be. But, obviously with things, COVID things made connection a lot, more difficult, not just for folks living with chronic illness, but for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. But we were so excited to finally be able to be in a room with people at the end of last year. And we all came together with this marathon team in New York City. There were people in that room that had never met another type 1 in their life. People that had lived with the disease for 50 years, 30 years, 20 years, and had never been able to connect with another person. And they were brought to tears over that. Because finding community when you live with a chronic illness like type 1 is that crucial. Mm-hmm. It's your support system. And that's why Beyond Type 1 exists. That's why this campaign in particular exists. But it's why, our mission is what it is. And that is to connect this community and ensure that they've got the resources they have to thrive and live beyond this illness, but that they can do it together.
That's powerful. Neve, what is the one thing you want to leave our audience with when it comes down to living with type 1?
I would say that I definitely want everyone to know that, like Jordan was saying, you can live beyond. There's absolutely nothing that you can't do just because you have diabetes. I've definitely learned that throughout the years, sometimes the hard way. It might make things a little more challenging, require a little bit more planning, but I would definitely say the one thing I want to leave everyone with is that it doesn't really, it's not the be-all, end-all. Mm-hmm. Just because you have diabetes, life goes on, I would say, pretty much normally.
And what do you want to be when you grow up?
That's a hard question. I'm not exactly sure. Definitely going to all of the doctors over the years has, definitely interested in something with
come on to nursing. Come to nursing.
Yeah. It's definitely just, I'm fascinated by it and definitely a lot of respect for them.
That's great. That's great. So we just want to thank you for being here, Neve Pfaff, and sharing your type 1 diabetes story. And we'd also like to thank you, Jordan Gendricks, Vice President of Missions and Program at Beyond Type 1, a non-for-profit organization changing what it means to live with diabetes. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you both stay safe and continue to stay healthy. And thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a good time.
Thank you so much, Janine.
This is Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College, and we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Your Family's Health.
We'd like to get your feedback on your family's health. Send your comments by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu. Podcasts of today's show are available on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This program was produced at the studios of Nassau Community College in cooperation with the nursing department. Join us next week for another edition of Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.